Welcome back to this episode of xLights Bonus Gems. This is the release video for .16 that came out a couple days ago. And without further ado, system crash. 16 has got some problems with it. If you're having issues, roll back to 15. I believe we've got it tracked down to a certain situation. And if you want to try this for the workaround, if you're adding new props, what's happening is the protocol is not being populated. And as soon as if the protocol is not being populated, it's blank. And if you go and try to change anything on the controller or set a controller, it will crash xLights. So if you're finding that you're adding a prop and it creates the prop here, be sure that it's populated to WS2811. And I think once you do that, then you're free to make any other changes and assign to the controller. Otherwise, of course, you can go to the visualizer and use it. But that's the triggering thing that's causing it to crash. Expect that to be corrected very shortly. There is some crashing on Macs as well, and we haven't really narrowed that down. And just a reminder too that if it's your first update of the year, you may have to install the latest C++ version that goes with xLights. So again, reminder, go to xlights.org. And you should see in the downloads, click downloads, right here, Microsoft Visual C++ 2015 redistributable. Install that, you'll need a reboot, and then you should be able to run the latest version of xLights. The symptoms for that is you'd get the splash page for xLights saying it's starting up, and then it quickly dies off, and then you don't actually get into xLights. So those are the two things that we are aware of now. Like I mentioned, there's the Mac. We're having issues with it crashing, and on a controller, when you're hitting it in the layout, that if this protocol is not set, it will crash. So for example, right now I have no protocol set for these images because they're inactive. If I touch that, it's going to crash. So that's what we have. So anyway, without further ado, let's continue on with the README. There's a bunch of changes. It's been nearly a month since we did the latest update at 15. No big advancements here, but let's go through them. Fix crash on old DMX models. So Kyle did an implementation here. What we're finding that if you did an import and you imported a new model and you imported, say, the moving head model that was prior to the new moving head model that came out in, I think, .9 or .10, it would crash because we no longer support that model. Now it at least won't crash, but it'll give you a warning and saying it's not supported. You'll have to get the new DMX model for the moving head. So that should be addressed. Scott did some more cleanup with the Genius controllers. I believe there's still an outstanding issue with the Genius controllers and long-range receivers. So that's definitely an issue ticket open for that. Hide individual start channels for cube model. This was, I think I've got cube model here with my pixel stakes. I think here, hold on. And pixel stake, yeah, that's a cube model there. There was a sort of, somebody found this almost like a backdoor, and it wasn't meant to be open. And that is if you could turn on the individual start models for it. And it's not there now because it's been blocked, but you used to be able to put a check mark in there, much like you can do for a custom model, individual start nodes. So that was available to you. And it was incorrectly available to you. It was not, there's no coding to support it, but it was letting you type it in there, making you think you were doing it, but you were not. So that has been removed. Disable update button for the base show folder. I do not have the base folder set up. Let me just quickly do that. There's a whole video on how to use the base folder. If you're into doing a Halloween and a Christmas show, you might look at doing a base folder setup. Enable base folder right there, click OK. And I'll just show you here. There's an update button here You shouldn't be able to press the update button if you're the base show folder here and it's the base show folder here, because there's nothing to update. You're already in it. The idea behind the update button is to update your Christmas folder with changes that you did in the base, or to update your Halloween show folder with updates from the base. So it doesn't make sense to have the update button if you're already in the base show folder. So that's been removed. This was brought up, an issue with the warp settings when you're copying it. Really nothing fancy here, is if you had a warp effect, which is this guy. So if you had some settings here and you did a Control C, Control V, it wasn't working properly, so that's been corrected. 4-channel RGBs were corrected by Scott. When pushing it to the WLED, it wasn't retaining the 4-channel settings, so that's been corrected. Fix single channel matrix displaying in wrong location. That was a really weird one. I think it was with if you had like an AC single channel, meaning like an AC matrix, it was drawing it in the wrong spot on the screen. Really an edge case that was corrected. Fix gamma rounding. So if you're aware on the controllers, the F16, for example, and it's the same with the other controllers, you can choose the default gamma. Am I correct or am I not correct? Somewhere, maybe it's not on F16. One of these guys has default gamma. Maybe I don't have a controller that even has it. Right click. No, maybe it's just experience lights, but it's sort of like brightness, default brightness and such. With gamma, there's only certain values that the gamma can be set to on the controller, and xLights wasn't honoring those settings. So if you said 15 and the gamma on the controller only allows 10 and 20, it wasn't setting 10 or 20. It was just not pushing anything. So that's been corrected. So I think it rounds down to the setting that's just prior to what you're requesting in xLights, rather than not pushing anything. On FPP8, there was a setting for, I think I've got my controller on. Yeah, okay. I don't have FPP8, but I just want to show you what he's talking about here. In the channel outputs, input-output channel outputs, if you were to go to a virtual matrix panel, in the output config, I think, or there's a setting here that says what HDMI port was being set. It was, you would see something like a -A0, I think it was, which is invalid. It should have been an A1, because it's supposed to be a 1 or a 2, not a 0 or a 1. If that is a little bit of computer speak, but anyway, it was pushing the wrong value, so that's been corrected. I know we've had a few people in the Zoom room where they're like, hey, I'm not getting any outputs on my virtual matrix, and we'd have to go in there and physically change it to the A1 setting as opposed to the A0, but that should be fine now for any FPP connects where you're pushing it, so that should be good. Blur zoom level. This was a problem with specifically on moving heads, but it really could affect anybody in the sequencer. If you went down to the node level, let me just grab a prop here. Oh, this should be good enough. I'm drilling down the strand 1. You have a node level. This is especially important on moving heads where you might have a fade in and a fade out. So let's go here. And then if I go start intensity 0, you can see it's fading in and going stronger. So think of that as a moving head. That was broken in the last couple of releases, and it was just spotted after 15 came out that you weren't able to actually do this on the node level. So that's been corrected. Thank you, Dan. Fan effect. This was a new ad from Scott, and I don't know what the bug was, but I'll just show you what he's done here. Fan effect. He introduced this with a couple of other props I'm gonna put it here. It's not sure it's gonna make any sense, but on this prop, but we'll show it anyway. Go to the effects settings. Let me just move this down so you can see. He's added a new option here that says scale to the buffer. So what that means is any settings you do on the radiuses and such, it'll be based on how big the buffer is. So how big is the 3D star in this case? It is, you know, if I was to go to the layout, just to show you what I'm talking about. I go to 3D star, 3D star. This is not exactly the buffer, but it could be very close. If I go to model data, chances are this is the buffer. It's going to be 5 by 5. So any value I do is going to be percentage of these 5 by 5, as opposed to a hard coded number. It's going to be almost like a percentage anyway. So it's more portable for sequence vendors to use that option so that they know that if they've done 50% of the, if they make the radius 10%, it'll be 10% of a matrix or 10% of a candy cane or 10% of a spinner. It'll always be the same. You don't have to make them bigger or smaller based on how big the prop is. So there must have been a little glitch there because he says there must have been an edge case that was spotted. Moving head effect, and I think I've got moving heads here. Yes, I do. So if you had the moving head adjust effect, drop it on here, make it bigger. What was happening was if you had some settings on this guy, all right. When you go to this guy here, and if you click none, it was supposed to just uncheck the boxes, but it was actually unchecking the boxes and resetting all the values. So we're not expecting it to do that. So that was corrected. Thank you, Pierre. Remember the position of the state dialog. So just to let you know, state dialog. What have I got that might have states in it? I don't know if that has. Anyway, I'm assuming he means something about this in terms of, you know, where did you have the dividers, etc. So did some cleanup there because I know he did something in the previous version to clean up the layout of the buttons and such. So that's been all corrected. Keith added something for Renard's support, setting the serial port speed. State effect, add fading. This is, we're playing with this a little bit. Let's see if I've got something that has some state effects. You know what, whatever. We'll create state effects for my candy cane. Might not make any sense, but we'll show you what we're talking about. All right, so add a state here, call it test one, and make a state of 1. And I'm going to choose these nodes. Let's go with these nodes. And in state 2, I'm going to have it do these nodes. So there you go. And why not force custom colors? Because we're here. Make this red. Make this green. And click OK. And I go to cane 1, master view, cane 1. I got too many groups. All models sorted. Cane, we collapse that. Cane 1 there. Drop in the state effect. So state effect means you want it to do something state 1 or state 2 or state 1 or state 2. Basically, it's like a switch. So you could say in the state effect up here, I want it to be state 1, you're going to get red. If I want it to be state 2, it would be 2. But the beauty of it is you can use a timing track. So if I had a timing track and I go add a new timing track and create metronome with tags, click OK. I'm going to make it every 1.5 seconds. I'm going to flip it between 1 and 2. So once I do that, it goes 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. So now if I click the state effect and I click off and click back on to reload this panel. I've now got the state effect, and you're going to see it's going to go red, green, red, green. But what Scott has added is a new option, and I'm going to expand this out. Maybe people don't know this. If you expand out, double clicking on Cane 1, you're going to get all the submodels, but you're also going to get the strand, which is the pixels. And you double click that again, you're going to see the impact on the lights. So during this 2 interval, we're going to get state 2. You're going to get red, green on the bottom half of the candy cane. And if I scroll down, you'll see that the red is on the other portion for number 1. But getting back to this change, what they've added is a way to make a subtle change, a subtle shading. If I have it right, as it's switching between states, it's going to fade out. So it's fading into the red, fading out of the red, into the green, out to the green. So you're just getting a subtle difference rather than a harsh changing of states. You see how it just sort of fades in and fades out, fades out. So it's just a subtle difference, something you can add to your sequences. DDP controller config. So under the controllers option, if you have a WLED controller, I believe it warns you here currently that you probably want to have this unchecked because WLED channels should always start at 1. What that means is xLights will track it as 11,055, but when it sends it to the controller, it's going to be channel 1 through 11,055. What Kyle has done is added a little setting so that we can force that in the controller properties. So if you have a controller that needs that setting, it'll be forced to uncheck it. It'll be done for you, so it's less chance of you missing that thing and messing up. Scott has done a bunch of stuff with the states dialog. It's just making life easier. There's probably way more that can be done, but it's a really good first step. There's a lot of people doing states now with these more complicated props. So there's some options here in the right click and up here in the triple dots. So if you find some things in there, you should find some new tools to use there. Faces dialog, again, more making things easier to use on the faces dialog. And if I go to my singing faces, matrix, there's probably matrix. Singing faces, click on this guy. And I'm assuming what has he done here? Add clear selected rows. So I'm gonna guess there's something where if I highlight, right click, no. This is the faces dialog. I'm not seeing a clear selected rows. Faces dialog, add clear selected rows. Sorry, Scott, I'm not seeing it. It must be something I'm missing here. Clear selected rows. I'm selecting some rows. No. Sorry, Scott. Watch out for an addendum. I'm gonna do some research. Should be able to find it. If I'm not seeing it, I will put an update in the comments. There must be something I'm missing. Submodels dialog and imports from another layout. So that was in the submodels dialog. So let's go to submodels, right click or single click. There's probably import from layout. So I'm guessing that is that there. So that what that means is if you've got a purchase sequence vendor, if you've got another show that you've unzipped somewhere, you can point it to that one, or maybe your Christmas show folder or a backup show folder, you can pull it in for that. This one thing I added on the import dialog, when I was reviewing all my sequences, I realized that I was importing sequences and not having my sequence set to the right frame rate. So what you want to do when you create a new sequence, musical sequence, I'm going to do animation because that doesn't need to be musical. I was just doing done and I was getting 20 frames per second by default and not realizing it. Because if I do 20 frames per second, I'm just going to purposely choose 20, click done. And if I did import effects, and if I chose a sequence, if I go show folder, test folder, I got anything in here? There we go, Cotton Eye Joe. If I click on this guy, now it'll give you a warning because it says this sequence that we're going to import from is I'm only at 20, but you're currently importing 40 frames per second. So before I go and do all of this mapping, I perhaps want to cancel out of the import. See, if I did all this importing, I'm going to lose some granularity. It's almost like resolution on your TV screen. You're basically taking some of the resolution that you can't get back. So maybe you don't gonna, once I've seen that warning, I'm going to close that and I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say, you know what? I was wrong. I missed something. I'm going to go settings, sequence settings. I'm going to change it by clicking this button and yes, and I'm going to change it to, I want 20 frames per second or 40 frames per second, sorry. Test, click save. And done. And then when I come back and do import effects and choose this guy, I'm not going to get the warning now. Hopefully, right? No warning. There you go. So rather than letting you go in here and map all your stuff over and then realizing you've lost some of that quote resolution, it gives you that warning prior to going into that dialog. Visualizer, add gamma. Visualizer, change export. So visualizer, the gamma must be only on certain controllers. So I just want to double check. Help about. I am on the new version, right? Yes, I am. Thought I was. Right click. It must be only on certain controllers. Maybe it's just the, let me just go ahead and create one. Vendor, Experience Lights, Genius Controller Pro, sure, that one. Put in a fictitious IP. And, okay, don't see here. Right click. Scott, what am I? Oh, duh. I'm having a brain moment here. Forgot. I got to be in the visualizer, of course. So right click. Nope. Let's pull over this guy. Right click. Set gamma. There you go. This is what we're talking about before when earlier on in the README. If I put in a gamma that is not supported, say I put in 1.7, it's going to round down or it's going to round down to the valid values that you have for gamma. And that was something that was added here because the ability to set the gamma on the visualizer before you had to actually go to the layout and you would choose it on the prop itself under controller connections. You'd have to set the gamma there. So now you can quickly do it on the visualizer. Thank you, Scott. Change export from CSV. I think that's just a matter of formatting. Really not much else has changed. I don't think so. If I went to the visualizer, and if I did right click, save as a spreadsheet, it's going to save it now as an XLSX, which gives Scott more ability to do things like it says in the README, he can add coloring and formatting. It's not just a simple text file anymore. So he's making it a little more user-friendly. Keith added the fprop as a dummy controller. Fprop is a little standalone controller that xLights, it's sort of unique in that xLights can't push to it. So there wasn't an initial reason to put it in xLights, but I guess it's a nice place to somebody's decided that let's add it here because you're going to want to use your layout and set it up. So they've added it as a dummy controller. I'm just going to reverse this out. I believe it would be under Falcon because it is a Falcon product, and there it is, fprop. So there it is, fprop. There's an IP address in here. You put in any dummy address. You'll notice you can't upload inputs or outputs. There's a whole different setup for those people that have an fprop. They're aware how to configure it. It's done differently than these other controllers. Just a simple change with the wording on some of the abandoned messages. So I can't remember specifically which one it was or which ones there was, but there was a couple of them. Basically, it's saying if you go into these things and you cancel out of it, go in there and click this, click add, click OK. If I click cancel, there would be messages that pop up and the wording was different between each one. So it was just a small change to consistency. Clyde from PPD Pixel Pro Displays brought up a point where the small waveform preferences wasn't being set. I'm not sure too many people even were aware of it, but if I go to the sequencer, this is the waveform. You can, and it's taking up a lot of real estate. Some people like to go into file preferences, and you can go to effects grid. You can say small waveform, click OK, and there you go. It shrinks down quite a bit and it gives you a couple more extra lines of space. So that preference wasn't being honored. Now it is, so you can keep it that way if you like. And just a couple of tweaks to the display. It looks like I want to tweak it just a little more because it looks like it's chopped off by 1 pixel. So stay tuned for a small update at some point to that because that still bugs me. It looks like it's just a little bit too small. I swear it looked right in testing. Add RGB support to an image model. This was something I wish I remember the name of the person who originally coded it almost a full year ago. What it is it allows you to take images and make them change colors based on maybe you've got a floodlight. So you have a picture of a floodlight and you can make it change colors rather than using a white thing like this. You can actually have a picture of a floodlight and change it. The trick to that is to use the image icon, which is this one here, image, create an image, but you also have to tell it that it's not just an image of a single color. You would tell it it's an RGB because maybe it's got a single pixel inside of it. Think of a blow mold, for example. You might have 1 pixel in there or a group of pixels operating as one, and you want that blow mold to actually be truly represented in xLights by changing it to red, green, and blue. And now you can actually use that image that you got off the internet and stuck it in your display, and it will now show different colors as it's being rendered and shown in your house preview. Dan has made a small change to this, I think, submodel buffer. So I think it's just a column title thing, so not a big deal. It's just for clarity. If I went to matrix submodels, not sure if I can show you where it is, but no, just add a new one, test. And if I say add row, add row, add row, there you go. So if I'm vertical buffer, which means I'm rotating this by 90 degrees, it's left on the bottom, right is on the top. So if I was to say this guy, that'd be the first whatever bunch of numbers, and this one would be, I don't know, these ones, for example. Since it's a vertical buffer, it means it goes from left to right, bottom to top. If you didn't have a vertical buffer, it's the bottom row versus the top row. So this is just a small change in the wording to make it clear and obvious to people that if it's in a vertical buffer, we are talking about verticals. Functionally, it's no change. It's just something on the UI to make it easier to understand. This is something behind the scenes. Dan is optimizing the code, always looking for ways to improve it and remove some cycles in there and helping things go. This was something I guess was brought upon us from some updates to Mac OS, I believe, that it says we need to revalidate your permissions to directories and such every once in a while. So what that happens is xLights has media directories, like where your audio and your images and pictures, and all of a sudden xLights has no access to those folders, and it was causing xLights to crash or hang up or something. So now, rather than doing that, it says, nope, I trust you. Give me permissions back to those folders and continue on. So that'd be for Mac folks only, of course. Node layout, change the background colors for dark mode. This is, let me cancel out of this guy. Oh, there's the message we're talking about, just making sure that the text of these messages are consistent. So that's what I was referring to. And this is a node layout. So if I'm on a matrix and I right click, node layout, node layout, there we go. You see the different colors, but for dark mode, you couldn't read the black on green or whatever color it is in dark mode. So Kyle has changed those colors up so it works good in dark mode. There are new preference added for for aliases. So if I go to File, Preferences, I believe it's under the other model renaming alias behavior always prompt, which is the normal, is the default. That's the way we're used to. But you can say always no if you know that you never want to add the aliases, or you can say always take the aliases. So if I was to grab a prop here, Control C, Control V, it says, should I add a model to the same group as the original? Yes. And now if I was to go and rename this thing to new one, I thought it was gonna ask me if I wanted to create an alias for that. Oh, well, let me try. Let me try a different way. Replace a model with this model, and I want to replace my triple arches 1. Click OK. Should I copy the yes? User real site, yes. Would you like to say the old name? So in this case, just to be clear, what it would do is I'm going to replace this with 1. So this will become triple arches 1. But do you want to keep this old name as an alias? So that's what it's talking about. So sometimes you wouldn't, sometimes you wouldn't. I wouldn't say no, but that preference is going to be whether should I even show this as an option. If I say no, that's fine. It's going to replace it, which it did. It's now this guy. But if I change my mind, I can always come back to aliases and put it in here and say add. I want to add my triple arches new one as a name. So even if you don't add it, you can always add the aliases. Aliases are still a work in progress. They're used on the import mapping function, so that if the sequence vendor called it triple arches left and right and center, and you have triple arches 1, 2, 3, you can create aliases so that your names match your sequence vendor's names. Especially true with spinners, or if they have a long-winded like I have a mini tree, a lot of times that's called Boscoio's large 360 mini tree Coro, where if the vendor calls it Boscoio large 360 and you don't want to have all that verbiage, you can just create an alias that matches those sequence vendors so that when you do the auto map, it'll pull it in. Add copy model, including submodels. So this was in the sequencer. If it's specific, especially if you have some of these props that have large submodel groups or large submodels. Let me just, if I can grab, where can I grab PC spinners? Okay, let me find one of my bigger props. These are my groups. I unfortunately don't have a showstopper spinner. I have a Canadian equivalent. Well, not equivalent, but you get the idea. So you have a spinner, something like this. I'm just going to drop a bunch of effects on it on the various submodels. And if I have another one of these ornaments and I want to copy it down to it, if I did click on this and right click and say model, copy effects, it's only going to copy this one effect. It's going to forget all of these guys. So we've added a new option here. This is model, copy effects, including the submodels. So it's going to include all of this. Now the proof is in the pudding. Let's see if it actually works. Now you got to remember, like any copy and paste function, you want to lay it out the same way because it's really literally going to paste it all the way back here. So you want to make sure you expand it out. Click on here, right click, and fingers crossed, models, paste effects, please. There you go. So you can see that it duplicated everything, including the submodels. Because on some of these props now, you've got literally tens, if not hundreds, of submodels, and there could be effects all throughout them. So that gives you a new option there. That covers off the list. We are really coming into showtime, so we're probably not going to address too many big issues, and I can't speak for all the developers, but I know myself, not that I'm a big developer, but I don't want to risk breaking things going into showtime. So I'm personally going to be stepping back quite a bit, and I think we're going to be trying our best to put out quality changes at this point going forward. But be sure and post your GitHub issues, as always, by going to Help, Issue Tracker, and it opened up a new page. Here's my issue tracker. Here's not my issue. Here's GitHub's xLights issue tracker, and you can see the latest issues. And even since I started this video, somebody's already talking about can open it up on the Mac OS. This is what we're seeing on the Mac. So on version 16, problems with the Mac. And this was the issue where it will crash if you don't have the protocol set. So be sure and set that up. Another Mac issue on 16, so be sure and take a look at that. And I think that's it for bugs that we are really trying to iron out. So there you go. There's .16. Again, if you're on Windows, .16. And if you are having any issues that you think are, stopping you in your tracks, feel free to go back to 15. But I think we've provided the workarounds for 16 at this point. And let us know if you have any other comments down below. Be sure and like and subscribe and all the rest of that jazz. The Zoom room meetings or presentations are pretty much ended for the year. So we're open 24/7 all the time in the Zoom room for any questions or concerns. Please try and do your homework before you go in there. We can't take all that time to walk you through everybody, because the xLights community is so large. But feel free to jump in there if you have a pressing question, or if you want to just follow along with helping solve other people's questions, or learning as we go along to solve other people's issues that as they face them before you have ran into them yourself. Anyway, that's it for the presentation, and see you next time.